What's up, guys? It's GP back with another episode of GP's Library, and this week I'm going to try to churn out some book reviews. We are currently in the middle of Black History Month, and I'm just going to give you guys some of my favorite books really written about some historical and modern day black figures. I mean, some of these books aren't written by black people, but they're written about black people, so that's good enough for me. And during Black History Month, I really feel like it's important sometimes not just to learn about new history of people we don't know, but to also rewrite in our mind the history of people that we think that we do know, and people that were put into our history books and put into our school textbooks that we kind of gloss over as historical figures, but we're not really giving the weight of how important some of these people are historically. And the reason I didn't really put Black history and stuff like that too much in the title is because, to me, these people are important historically. They happen to be black, but everybody I name is pretty, or everybody I'm going to talk about over these next 5, 6, 7 reviews is important to American history, is important to American culture, regardless of race. They do happen to be black, and it is Black History Month, and I will be talking about black figures. And if that's a turn off for you, so be it. But here we go. First book I am talking about is Satchmo, The Genius of Louis Armstrong. And I'm going to make this fun. This isn't going to be just facts about these people. It's going to be like any other book review I do. I'm going to talk about when I read it, how I read it, which obviously here is physical copy. And then I'm going to talk about some takeaways. Some takeaways will be related to like race-related stuff, but a lot of takeaways won't be. So I read this February 15th, or I finished this February 15th, 2022. And it was an impactful book for me. It really was. I might say this a good amount, but I feel like, and this is going to lead into my first main takeaway, that Louis Armstrong is a very, very undersold celebrity and figure in American history. Obviously, most people have heard of Louis Armstrong, but he isn't put up there with the superstars and rock stars of American history. He's not put up there with Sinatra. He's not put up there with modern day like Drake, Michael Jackson. He's not put up there with these people. He's not thought of in that light. But in his time, we have to remember how big jazz was. We have to remember how radical jazz was. We have to remember how radical jazz clubs were. So he was the coolest figure out. Today, playing trumpet and the type of singing he did and stuff like that, it's not radical, it's not different, it's not new to us, and it's not what will make you a superstar. Like, the biggest jazz musicians in the world today aren't our biggest musicians in the way that rock stars, country singers, and hip-hop people are. So we kind of have to put ourselves in the frame of mind of the 1920s to 40s, 50s, when jazz and jazz clubs were huge in the United States. And if we put ourselves in that position, we can realize that Louis Armstrong is that dude. He was huge. He was a superstar, worldwide superstar too, not just an American superstar. He traveled all around the world. There's a story in this book that talks about how Louis Armstrong brought on the first age of black entertainer that looked other race, i.e. white crowds, eye to eye. Like, before that, it was a barrier in between. Like, people were dancing, people were doing all this stuff, people were facing their own band, but it wasn't an eye-to-eye exchange where the performer, a black performer, would be looking each person in their eyes as he was singing. It gave a story in the UK. They threw tomatoes and literally threw him off of the stage because they were so shocked he had the audacity to look this British crowd in the eyes. And Louis did not give a shit. He didn't give a shit about much. He gave a shit about playing music. He gave a shit about his family. He gave a shit about writing, strangely enough, which I'll get to in a little bit. But Louis didn't care about the reactions of the time. He didn't care about any negative press he got. He cared about being true to himself, being true to his New Orleans roots, and being true to the art that he was creating. Something else I also took away from this is that he was a huge pot smoker, and he was a driving force in pot being made illegal in the United States of America. The jazz clubs where a lot of other race women would be hanging out would be mesmerized by these trumpeters and musicians and stuff, and would entice other people to smoke weed, to relax, to enjoy a night out. And these type of actions were considered like anti-American, because jazz was radical and these jazz clubs were radical, and rubbing elbows with black people was a radical thing, especially for Caucasian women. So with that being said, he was a big part of it. Like I think it was 1937 that weed became illegal. Louis Armstrong birth date. Louis Armstrong was born August 4th, 1901, and I believe weed was made in 1937. So he was in his mid-30s when weed became illegal in the United States. So you can imagine he had a pretty much lifelong weed smoking habit by the time weed had become illegal. And it turns out he was one of the first, if not the first, big celebrities arrested for weed. And according to this book, he was arrested a few times. He had consistent law issues with weed because he would hotbox. He would roll a huge J and he would ride around in his car after shows or before shows and just be smoking out the window, hotboxing his whip. Which is hilarious to me because times haven't changed that much. Guys still be in the studio smoking, creating good music. Black artists who are making something radical that people think is not okay. Times haven't changed as much as we think they have. Now, people aren't smoking on social media and YouTube and shit like I am, or people are, but back in his day, what he was doing was radical. Singing about weed was radical. Like, playing music and smelling like weed, that's radical. Like, these guys were change makers in their society, and he was pretty vocal about his love for weed and about how wrong it was that it was illegal. And racist it was, especially at the time. Now today, but especially in its roots, about how it was illegal. So Louis Armstrong is an OG stoner, and that is an amazing fact to me. That's something I love to learn about. That's something I love to read about. They said he would smoke J's like the size of like big thumbs type shit. Like he was blowing down. Louis Armstrong, one of the livest men in American history. And that leads me to my next point, and that history is more recent than we've kind of been led to believe. Like the 30s was not that long ago. Really, I mean, when you really think about it, and what he was going through, and how it's so new for people to be going to jail for drugs. It started in the 30s, we're not even at 2030, so we're under 100 years, and how many people we've imprisoned over weed and stuff like that. And he was like the original person dealing with this issue. He told it was an issue. He told it it's not okay, and we still dealt with it for almost 100 years. So time moves quickly and slow at the same time, like policies and stuff like that. It's taken a long time for it to catch back up, but he was telling us the way before. He wasn't a heavy drinker. He was a smoker, and he enjoyed his life, his family, and his art. He didn't hurt anybody. That's another takeaway from this book, is I finally got to read about a celebrity, especially from the past, that my opinion of them wasn't changed drastically from reading about them. A lot of these guys, even a few of these people I'll bring you in a little bit, or I'll talk to you guys about this week, they really are like, okay, I get why he's famous, but goddamn, this dude would be canceled today. Or goddamn, this dude's life is dark. Louis Armstrong came from a dark childhood, but he really grew up to be a great musician and overall, at least historically known as a great dude. A happy dude, even with the amount of racism and hate that he faced. Louis Armstrong, I'll say once again, is really that dude. But I do videos like this to really encourage you guys to look up some of these people they tell us about. Louis Armstrong changed music. He changed black people's ability to perform. He was like the people that were performing, let's say like Bill Cosby and some of these like face to crowd, okay, and white audience, even like the Dick Gregorys of the world, okay to face a white audience and speak at them, they couldn't have done that without Louis Armstrong getting tomatoes thrown at him and booed and threatened and all this other type of stuff, just playing music. Today they call rap evil. Before rap, they called, like when black people were making up rock, they called that evil. They called jazz evil. They called soul music down in the South, down in Mississippi, they called that devil music. There's a trend. There's a trend. And when you read about these artists, you really realize this trend. So every music form that black people have created is evil. But when soul, or like when that soul music became country music and it came more of a Caucasian genre, it no longer was evil. So when people are talking about these things and people are talking about like rap's not music, jazz wasn't music to a lot of people for a while. Original country music wasn't music to people for a while. Punk rock wasn't music to people for a while. So be careful what we dismiss as somebody else's art or as an art that we're not familiar with, because at some point it's just happened over and over and over again. And I hear people talk about rap the exact same way they were writing about jazz and this. Not legitimate music, underground, inner city. All these terms to denounce the validity of black art. So who's it for? If you're a Louis Armstrong fan, which very few people really would be that are like my age or something like that, but if you're a fan of his impact on history, you're a fan of jazz, definitely read this book. If you're a fan of black history, if you want to learn about how we've been lied to about these black figures and their size and their impact, read this book. If you want to learn just about a legend, if you want to learn about people who have done things at the highest level that they've ever been done in the history of art or the world, this is a book for you. People like Louis Armstrong come around once in a generation. He's that once in a generation artist for his generation. He doesn't get that credit. He doesn't get his name in the history books, in my opinion, as much as he should. But guys, it's up to us to find this information. It's up to us to read this information. And it's up to us to teach others what the correct information is. He never really released his writings too much, but it's written about in the book how he was a consistent writer. And so one of my walking away points is to be interdisciplinary. Even like, say if you want to make music, like if I wanted to make music, I could make music, not put it out and just do it for joy. He wrote for joy. He didn't put books out. He put music out. That was his output. But it's okay to be an interdisciplinary artist in your own life. Art is for you. My second main walking away point from this is it's okay to be a little bit radical. Louis Armstrong wasn't a complete radical in terms of like just straight chaos and anarchy. Smoking weed was his escape, was his way of creating art that impacted millions of people, and it was okay. So if other people, a little bit more conservative people, you feel like you're radical, it's okay. It's okay. They have their life, we have our own lives, and we can both live them. Guys, Satchmo, The Genius of Louis Armstrong by Gary Giddins. A great book about a legend who needs to be discussed for the rest of time, or else people with the impact like him, will be forgotten into history, and then we're doing ourselves a great disservice by not remembering the foundations of music in America, the foundations of art in America, and the role people like Louis Armstrong played in it. It's been another episode of GP's Library. I'll see you guys next time.